The story starts with a massive fire suddenly erupting at the school. Rather than running away, our hero heads back to the place he cherishes most, the school's art room. There, he mysteriously steps into one of his own paintings. A week passes after the incident. Gio remains trapped inside the painting. Time moves differently there, so he has no idea how much time has truly passed. Still, he manages to figure out a few basic rules about this bizarre world. The first rule is that anything he draws becomes real. A bag of salt, cooking pots, spatulas, flowers, and even trees instantly spring to life. Because of this ability, he never has to worry about running out of food again. However, the power comes with one major restriction. It does not work on humans. Anyone he draws turns into nothing more than a warm corpse and can never become a living person. After understanding that ability, Gio uncovers the second rule. A mysterious frame hanging from a tree lets him interact with the outside world. He can even leave the painting through it. During one of those trips, he learns that more than 30 years have passed since the school fire. The world has changed completely and is now overrun by monsters. Unable to adjust to this new age, he decides to stay inside the painting, believing that a portrait belongs within its frame. As time goes by, Gio discovers the third rule. The forest inside the painting has developed into a fully functioning ecosystem. He had only painted a two-story cottage and a forest, yet countless plants and landmarks he never drew now fill the landscape. Every creature living there is also friendly toward him. Since they were born from his artwork, they naturally regard him as their creator. While exploring even deeper, Gio learns the fourth rule. It is not a rule of the forest itself, but a phenomenon related to those who awakened after the great catastrophe. The people of Earth now call them hunters, and Gio realizes that he has become one as well. Inside the painting, life feels like a peaceful simulation game where he gathers ingredients, cooks delicious meals, eats well, sleeps peacefully, and never has to work. It becomes the happiest life he could ever imagine. Back when Gio worked as a teacher, he never had enough time to enjoy cooking. Now he happily spends hours preparing and savoring his meals, embracing what he calls a peaceful 3-hour dining life. Finally, Gio discovers the last rule. He has become one with the painting itself. At that moment, his identity is fully revealed, and the main character is introduced as Gio. He had grown deeply attached to the peaceful world inside the painting. It was so calm that he would not have minded spending the rest of his life there. Meanwhile, in the outside world, two people discover the painting. They are stunned that it survived the massive school fire without a single blemish. They also notice the title written on it, Gio's Portrait. After examining it, they conclude that the title proves it is an item, since they found it inside an abandoned school deep in the mountains of Gangwon province. And it was the only object left completely untouched. They become convinced it came from a dungeon. Believing they had found something incredibly valuable, they quickly pack up the painting. They wonder whether it will count as valuable loot, but they are certain the Collector Guild will pay an enormous price for it. Thrilled by the idea of becoming rich, they carried the painting away. While Gio continued living his peaceful life, the entrance to the painting suddenly shifted on its own. Before he could understand what was happening, the painting had already been moved to a collector's gallery. Sometime later, a man purchased the painting and displayed it on the wall of his home. His identity was soon revealed. His name was Sabol, an S-class hunter and the leader of the Collector Guild. The story then flashes back to an earlier moment. Sabol's assistant asks why he spent such a massive amount of money on a single portrait. Sabol explains that this is the very painting the Hunter Association president has been desperately trying to acquire. He then recalls the events from 31 years ago when the great catastrophe struck. Countless dimensions collided with Earth, creating dungeons that endlessly spawned monsters. As humanity stood on the brink of extinction because of the divinity's interference, the system was created and ultimately saved mankind. He then mentions one of humanity's greatest figures, Hunter Association President Dan Hira. Although she has no interest in collecting items and only enjoys raising monsters, she still drove the bidding price up to $2,000 just to obtain this portrait. Hearing that, the assistant is left utterly stunned. Sabol begins wondering what makes this painting so extraordinary. Even with his appraisal skill, he cannot obtain any information about it, making it hard to believe such an item could even exist. Realizing his mistake, the assistant admits that his own abilities were too limited to recognize the portrait's true worth. He apologizes for judging it so quickly. Sabol tells him there is no need to apologize because he understands. After all, even he has no idea what the portrait truly is. The story then returns to the present. As he quietly observes the painting, Sabol admires its astonishing craftsmanship. He believes that if a human painted it, The artist's talent must be beyond imagination. Even if it wasn't created by a human, he would still reach the same conclusion. The portrait feels as though a living person has been sealed within it, overflowing with an unbelievable sense of life. At that very moment, Gio suddenly opens his eyes from inside the painting. The unexpected sight leaves Sabol completely shocked. For a brief instant, he feels as though he is gazing into endless darkness, filled with countless colors, resembling universe itself. A moment later, Gio quietly closes his eyes once again. Witnessing this, Sabol becomes even more convinced that the painting is far from ordinary. The fact that even his appraisal skill cannot identify it only strengthens that belief. Meanwhile, Gio, the man trapped inside the painting, is absolutely terrified. He quietly reflects on his situation. Even inside this peaceful cabin, he has begun to feel that his life is in danger. He had already noticed that the scenery beyond the entrance had been changing recently, but he never imagined someone would actually start talking to him. Outside the painting, Sabol politely addresses the portrait and asks if they can have a conversation. The unexpected request leaves Gio feeling incredibly awkward. As he watches the outside world through the entrance, Gio realizes that the painting has been placed inside an incredibly luxurious mansion. The carefully designed interior makes it clear that the gallery is treasured by its owner. That realization immediately worries Gio. The frame is his only path to the outside world. If he steps out now, it could easily be seen as trespassing. He even fears that someone might mistake the portrait for a cursed painting and burn it. To him, the outside world now feels far more dangerous than before. Seeing no response, Sabol assumes he approached too abruptly. He decides to leave for the day and promises to return tomorrow. Hearing that only makes Gio even more anxious. As the days pass, Gio resumes his peaceful routine inside the painting, beginning with another delicious meal. Today, he decides to brew tea using the flowers and fruits he had previously gathered and dried. However, he realizes he does not own a tea set. He simply sketches one, and the tea set instantly becomes real. He then quietly sits down and enjoys a cup of tea. This soon becomes one of the newest hobbies of the unemployed slacker living inside the painting. Using the system's elixir refining method, he starts brewing medicinal tea. According to the system, the tea can stop bleeding and strengthen the immune system. Unfortunately, Gio has no way to confirm those effects on himself. Ever since he fell into the painting, his body has completely lost its normal physiological needs. He can still move, eat, and sleep, but he never feels hot or cold, never sweats, and no longer needs to use the bathroom. Simply falling into a painting has turned him into something far beyond an ordinary human. On the bright side, it also means he never has to clean a bathroom again. However, that is not the biggest concern on his mind. At that moment, Sabol's voice reaches him through the painting once again. Gio realizes that 11 days have already passed since Sabol first tried to communicate with him. The entrance itself suggests that Sabol is a relatively trustworthy person, and Gio appreciates his friendly attitude. Even so, replying still feels far too overwhelming. Outside the painting, Sabol admits that watching someone only open and close their eyes inside the frame has been driving him crazy because he desperately wants to have a conversation. He even wonders whether his offerings are inappropriate. He considers that the most suitable sacrifice might be a sinful human or perhaps someone completely pure. Since finding sinful people in modern society is easy, he offers to provide any kind of sinner Gio might desire. He also promises to fulfill any request involving items, contracts, or conditions if only he receives a response. Even after hearing all of that, Gio feels even more pressured. He believes that replying even once would lead to a future he could never manage. Still refusing to give up, Sabol wonders whether a language barrier is the issue. He reveals that he has already tried speaking in 27 different languages without getting any reaction. Gio also learns from the gallery staff that Sabol is the chairman of one of South Korea's 3 largest conglomerates. Hearing that leaves Gio wondering why someone so important is spending his time here instead of working. Sabol asks one final time whether Gio truly has no intention of speaking with him. Gio remains completely silent. Accepting the silence, Sabol decides to leave and promises to return again before walking away. After he leaves, Gio reflects on Sabol's behavior. He cannot sense any malicious intent from him, and he does not dislike him because he genuinely seems like a good person. Even so, the constant attention is mentally draining. Gio convinces himself that Sabol cannot keep this up forever. Just as he eventually left today, he will likely grow tired of waiting one day. When that time comes, Gio plans to speak with him. His greatest concern is the possibility that Sabol might eventually decide the portrait cannot be reasoned with and burn it. If the painting is destroyed, Gio has no idea what will happen to the world inside it. He has no intention of being burned alive. More than anything, he wants to regain ownership of his one and only entrance. The scene then shifts back to the outside world, where a woman is carefully examining various items. The moment she notices the portrait, she suddenly freezes in shock. At the same time, she senses someone's presence behind her. She turns around only to find a man calmly asking for a conversation. One of South Korea's top 3 guild collectors owned a private gallery. The gallery belonged to Sabal and was accessible only to around 300 licensed hunter curators and guests purchasing artwork. A mysterious man arrives at the guild and steps into the elevator. An employee informs him about rumors of a ghost. The employee explains that the gallery on basement level 5 has received 17 complaints over the past 2 weeks. Guild leader Sabal collected anything he considered art, even if the artwork's true nature happened to be a monster. Most of the ghost incidents in the gallery had actually been caused by monsters. The mysterious man is Yongun, an A-class hunter known as the Gardener of the Snowfield and a collector-curator. Yongun learns that ghost incidents are not uncommon, but this case has resulted in an unusually high number of complaints. The employee explains that the guild has successfully prevented the rumors from spreading outside since the incidents have remained relatively minor. Controlling the flow of information has not been difficult. However, there is no guarantee that the situation will remain under control forever. Hearing this, Yongun immediately realizes that a huge amount of overtime is waiting for him. Even so, he is already accustomed to dealing with situations like this. He accepts the assignment and asks what needs to be done. The employee praises his reliability and admits that he truly wishes Yongun would become the guild's administrative manager. Yongun thanks him for the compliment. The employee recalls that Yongun once served as the research team leader at the Hunter Association. Yongun confirms that it is true. The employee remembers how everyone at the association glared at him after he resigned. Yongun explains that he simply never wanted to stand out. Understanding his decision, the employee decides not to press the matter any further. Although he admits it is a shame, the employee emphasizes that allowing rumors about the gallery to spread would seriously damage the guild's reputation. The guild has already reported everything to the guild leader and is preparing countermeasures. Witness statements regarding the ghost incident have also been compiled, and starting next week, every staff member will undergo enhanced safety training. Yongun began reading the investigation report. The first sighting had occurred at 4:32 a.m. The first witness was a 24-year-old staff member named Mr. Kim, who had no chronic illnesses and a perfectly normal attendance record. The ghost was consistently described as around 188 centimeters tall, with a well-built physique, pale skin, black hair, and a black cape. The report noted that every witness gave the exact same description. Everyone also insisted that the ghost was incredibly handsome. A composite sketch had even been created based on the testimony of staff member Park, who claimed to have exceptionally high standards. The report listed several recurring traits. Witnesses found it almost impossible to make eye contact with the ghost. Although none of them could properly see its face, every single witness still insisted that it was remarkably handsome. The ghost moved in complete silence. Even during conversations, no footsteps or other sounds could be heard. The only audible thing was its voice. Yongun noticed how remarkably consistent all the reports were. He concluded that the monster had disguised itself as one of the gallery's exhibits, yet made no attempt to hide its own existence. What puzzled him most was that the creature had appeared so many times without causing a single casualty. Every monster that had emerged from dungeons throughout the years had always been hostile toward humans, without exception. Everything that came from those other dimensions behaved the same way. If a monster like this truly existed, it would make headlines around the world. Before the public even heard about it, the Hunter Association would most likely capture it and confine it as a research specimen. Yongun kept reading and found another unusual detail. The report stated that the ghost gave people gifts. The employee explained that whenever someone encountered the ghost for the first time, it calmly approached them and tried to have a normal conversation, acting as though it were simply another human. No one actually believed it was human just because it pretended to be one. However, it truly seemed convinced that it was. After introducing itself, the ghost politely asked to exchange names with the staff member. It introduced itself as Seojio. Yongun noted that despite the overwhelming pressure preventing witnesses from even meeting its gaze, the ghost calmly carried on the conversation. The discussions themselves were completely ordinary. It never asked deeply personal questions, and if someone hesitated to reveal their identity, it never pressured them. After every successful conversation, the ghost presented the staff member with a gift. The employee showed Yongun photographs of candies, cakes, cookies, and various other sweets. Yongun was completely stunned, finding it hard to believe that a ghost behaved in such a surprisingly homely manner. He immediately asked whether the items had been analyzed. The employee explained that guild leader Sabal happened to have several prisoners available, allowing the guild to begin testing the gifts immediately. Yonggun casually realized that the guild leader had once again borrowed prisoners from the prison. He wondered if the gifts had been poisoned. Instead, the employee revealed the exact opposite. The gifts actually functioned as medicine. Some worked as treatments for anemia, while others acted as digestive medicine, painkillers, fever reducers, anti-diarrheal medicine, and many other remedies. Every gift perfectly matched the medical condition of the staff member who received it. Even the research team still could not explain how such ordinary-looking food possessed such extraordinary medicinal effects. The more Yonggun learned, the more troublesome the monster seemed. It could accurately understand the physical condition of living beings. It could also create items capable of directly affecting those conditions. On top of that, it had bypassed the guild's security systems and successfully disguised itself as one of the gallery's exhibits. That meant it also possessed exceptional concealment abilities. Yonggun concluded that the creature was almost certainly a high-ranking monster. The employee agreed but admitted that its goodwill toward humans made the situation extremely complicated. Yonggun remarked that he would almost prefer the monster to go on a rampage. A violent enemy would have been much easier to deal with. Instead, the guild found itself unable to subdue the creature, yet equally unable to earn its trust. Yonggun reflected that goodwill from dungeon civilizations was often the most terrifying thing imaginable. 11 years earlier, several nations had sent diplomatic delegations to establish peaceful contact with a civilization discovered inside a dungeon. Every single delegate eventually returned healthy but horribly transformed. To that civilization, the normal human body was considered inefficient. Believing they were helping, they had improved the delegates' bodies. That incident ultimately proved one undeniable truth. A monster would always remain a monster. From that day forward, every being that originated from a dungeon was officially classified as an enemy. Yonggun realized that dealing with this ghost would be an extremely difficult mission. Even so, he accepted the assignment. Handling incidents like this was his specialty. The employee sincerely thanked him. Yonggun modestly replied that responding to situations like these was simply part of his job. Just before he left, the employee remembered one final detail. He revealed that the ghost incidents had begun immediately after guild leader Sabol placed Gio's portrait on display in basement level 5. As Yonggun made his way toward the basement, he recalled several conversations with Sabol. The guild leader had repeatedly assigned him responsibility for newly acquired exhibits. Again and again, Sabol called his name while announcing yet another management assignment. Those memories made Yonggun realize this situation was far beyond a little extra work. He nervously pulled a lollipop from his pocket and started sucking on it, accepting that overtime was now absolutely unavoidable. Moments later, the elevator arrived at basement level 5. Curator Yonggun officially began the search for Gio's portrait. Yonggun arrived at the place where the ghost was known to appear. The time was 4:29. Right before him, the ghost appeared, and its appearance perfectly matched the information he had already gathered. He concluded that the entity was either aware of being watched or could only act under certain conditions or rules. Since it had a humanoid form, he considered the second possibility more likely. Its appearance pattern was irregular, so having the opportunity to observe it right away was incredibly fortunate. For the moment, he decided to simply watch it and verify the available data. At that instant, a system window informed him that the environmental sound adjustment skill had activated. He remembered that everyone had described the creature as so silent that they called it a ghost. However, he realized it did produce a sound, although it was extremely faint. It resembled the noise of blades of grass brushing against one another. The sound felt completely out of place for something with a 188-centimeter frame. As he continued observing, he noticed the humanoid quietly admiring the artworks. The exhibits displayed on that floor were extremely dangerous, and even the slightest careless touch could trigger a major incident. Yet the creature never touched anything. It only looked at the displays. Whether it was interested in art, simply passing time, or searching for an item it could use was impossible to determine. Its cautious behavior only made it seem even more intelligent. Eventually, their eyes met. The moment their gazes locked, Yonggun was overwhelmed by a terrifying sense of dread. He felt that something unfathomable was hidden within those eyes. The creature slowly began walking toward him, but then he realized it had actually hidden itself behind the portrait standing in front of him. The entire situation left him completely confused, and he regretted provoking it for no reason. Thus, day one of Gio's portrait investigation came to an end. The story then shifted to Gio's world. Gio reflected on everything that had happened. He wondered why the man had hidden there. He believed the man must have been afraid of him. Until now, every staff member had run away after seeing him, but this time it strangely felt as though he had been the one who ran away instead. He became determined to keep acting like a harmless portrait. He believed it would only cause trouble if these misunderstandings continued to grow. Even so, he had a strong feeling that the man would return someday. Soon afterward, several rabbits approached Gio. However, the moment he reached out to pet them, they quickly avoided him. Watching them hop away made him quietly wish he could have a pet of his own. The next day marked the beginning of day 2 of Gio's portrait investigation. Standing before Gio's portrait once again, Yongun reflected on the previous encounter. Since the creature had appeared to run away the day before, he had assumed it would hide itself completely. Seeing the portrait still there filled him with relief. Now he believed the real investigation could finally begin. He concluded that the being he had encountered yesterday proved this portrait was no ordinary monster. From this point onward, his goal was to uncover the portrait's rules and determine exactly what it was, along with whether humans could peacefully coexist with it. Even while simply standing there and looking directly into its eyes, Yongun felt the strength draining from his entire body. After the great catastrophe, countless monsters had appeared on Earth. Many of them possessed unique stories that humans had to investigate through raids. There was never any guarantee that a raid would succeed on the first attempt. Because of that, humanity had no choice but to carefully study these beings if they hoped to coexist with them. From inside the portrait, Gio initiated contact and expressed his desire to communicate. Yongun accepted the opportunity without hesitation because he understood that holding conversations with such beings had become one of humanity's methods of survival in the modern world. As the conversation began, Gio quietly evaluated Yongun's personality. He came to the conclusion that Yongun was genuinely a good person. That realization deeply moved Gio. He found it surprising that the man could calmly speak to a portrait without showing even a hint of fear. Yongun began by apologizing for what had happened the previous day. Gio realized that Yongun had even considered his feelings. In a world where people fought monsters the size of buildings, a talking, moving portrait was apparently nothing unusual. Gio accepted the apology and assured him there was no need to apologize. Yongun thanked him. Gio then asked for his name. Before answering, Yongun carefully thought it over. He wondered whether this conversation had begun through the same process experienced by the 17 people before him. He knew that a person's true name carried dangerous power. Names played an important role in contracts capable of binding souls together. For a brief moment, he suspected that the portrait might use his name to form some mysterious contract. However, based on the rules the portrait had displayed so far, he concluded that revealing his real name would not immediately put him in danger. He introduced himself as Yongun. With the introductions complete, Gio invited him to ask anything he wished. Yongun's first question was whether the figure he had made eye contact with that night had really been Gio. Gio confirmed that it was. Yongun then asked if that meant Gio could leave the portrait and move around freely. Gio admitted that he could. He also noticed that Yongun seemed visibly flustered. Yongun realized his surprise had become obvious. He never expected a non-human being to reveal such important information so casually. He admitted that he had not expected such an honest answer. Gio explained that there was simply no reason to hide it. Yongun then wondered what would have happened if his intentions had been malicious. Gio calmly replied that he already knew Yongun was a good person. That answer left Yongun stunned. He immediately began wondering whether Gio could distinguish good people from evil ones. He also considered what might happen if someone standing before the portrait were judged to be evil. He suspected such a person would face something far worse than simply being ignored. Gio invited him to continue asking questions. Yongun then brought up the mysterious ghost wandering through the gallery and leaving behind valuable gifts. He asked whether that ghost was actually Gio. Gio remained silent for a moment. The brief pause immediately made Yongun uneasy. After a brief pause, Gio focused on the word ghost. Yongun worried that he might have offended him by using that term, so he immediately apologized. Gio finally understood why everyone had always run away from him. He explained that a talking portrait could easily be mistaken for something haunted. However, he had never actually died. That answer led Yongun to conclude that Gio must have existed as a portrait from the very beginning. Wanting to learn more, Yongun asked why Gio had been wandering around the gallery. Gio explained that he had simply wanted to find out where he was in private. He reflected that he had suddenly become a portrait before being brought into the gallery. He admitted that the rare artworks had caught his attention. He had also wanted to know what kind of people worked there, how they lived, what their names were, and even what kind of food they liked. Even in a world that had changed so drastically, being alone naturally made someone long for conversation. A social life was essential for survival. He also wanted to avoid being burned because of a misunderstanding. Yongun found it strange that Geo described his curiosity in such a calm and emotionless manner. To him, Geo's interest in human lives resembled the curiosity many monsters showed toward humanity. Geo added that this was especially true when speaking with someone as polite as Yongun. Yongun noticed that Geo seemed to prefer well-mannered people. Geo admitted that compared to the gallery's loud, red-haired leader, the staff members were much easier to talk to. Yongun immediately realized Geo was referring to guild leader Sabol. Geo explained that the guild leader talked far too much, making conversations difficult to follow. Everything suddenly made sense to Yongun. He realized the guild leader had already offended Geo. That explained why Sabol had assigned him the investigation while providing almost no information. Geo had simply judged the guild leader to be rude and refused to speak with him. Yongun even felt that the guild leader had brought the situation upon himself. Even so, he apologized on behalf of his guild leader and admitted that the man could be a bit unusual. Geo replied that the guild leader did not seem like a bad person, so there was no issue. That answer allowed Yongun to understand another important rule. Someone who was merely rude would not become Geo's enemy unless they were truly evil. Even after easily seeing through an S-class hunter and guild leader, Geo remained completely calm. The more Yongun learned, the more mysterious the portrait became. Geo once again invited him to continue asking questions. Yongun then asked about the portrait itself. He wanted to know whether Geo could still see everything outside, even when the portrait's eyes appeared to be closed. He also wondered if Geo had been watching everyone from inside the portrait all this time. At the same time, Yongun could not understand why Geo seemed so determined to keep talking with humans. Geo explained that it was less like observing people and more like watching the scenery pass by through a window. It reminded him of quietly gazing outside during a long bus ride. He also revealed another important rule. The portrait only opened its eyes whenever he truly wanted to communicate with the outside world. He had confirmed this long ago by testing it with a broken mirror shard inside a burned-down school. At all other times, the portrait's eyes remained closed, allowing him to safely observe the outside world from within. Since Yongun was standing inside the frame, Geo naturally had no choice but to watch him. He simply found moving paintings fascinating. A chill ran down Yongun's spine. He finally realized that in Geo's eyes, the paintings were not the portrait itself. The real paintings were the humans moving outside the frame. Still recovering from that unsettling realization, Yongun admitted that Geo's blunt way of speaking constantly caught him off guard. Geo calmly explained that he believed he had simply been polite. To him, proper manners were something every human should naturally practice. Despite everything he had learned, Yongun genuinely enjoyed the conversation. With that, Day 2 of Geo's portrait investigation officially came to an end. After leaving the gallery, Yongun immediately reported back to guild leader Sabol. He firmly declared that the being inside the portrait was dangerous. Sabol simply smiled before asking exactly which being Yongun was referring to. Yongun quickly clarified that he was talking about the portrait. He explained that Geo was completely different from every monster humanity had encountered before. Those monsters overwhelmed people with their twisted goodwill until they suffocated beneath it. The most alarming part was that Geo genuinely recognized himself as human. Even so, Yongun could not tell whether Geo truly believed he was human or simply wanted to believe it. If something ever went wrong, the consequences could be unimaginable. He continued by explaining that Geo possessed his own understanding of good and evil. He judged others according to his own standards. Yongun could not imagine how Geo would react if he ever encountered someone truly evil. Because of that, he suggested sending the portrait to the Hunter Association as a research specimen. Sabol calmly admitted that he had expected Yongun to reach that conclusion. However, the more he heard about Geo, the more convinced he became that Yongun was simply doing something kind. Instead of approving the proposal, he instructed Yongun to keep talking with Geo. He wanted Yongun to become close to him and eventually introduce them, since he did not want to go through the trouble of being ignored again. He also asked Yongun to discover what Geo liked, although he admitted it was an extremely personal request. Yongun accepted the task. Since it was his job, he intended to carry it out without complaint. Sabol could only wonder why all of his employees remained so unfazed. Yongun replied that perhaps it was because the guild leader only recruited people like them. As he reflected on the conversation, Yonggun realized Sabol's obsession with collecting extended far beyond rare objects. Every employee in the Collector Guild had been personally selected, trained, and transferred by the guild leader himself. Regardless of a hunter's rank, Sabol never recruited anyone carelessly. If merely standing in Gio's presence was enough to overwhelm hunters with such strong wills and cloud their judgment, then the only conclusion Yonggun could reach was that the quality of Gio's soul was truly extraordinary. He promised to continue submitting regular reports. Sabol dismissed him. As Yonggun left, he couldn't help wondering whether the guild leader was actually planning to destroy the world. Soon afterward, Day 3 of Gio's portrait investigation began. Yonggun started by asking whether Gio ever felt lonely. Gio replied that he did not. Yonggun apologized for asking such a personal question since only gallery employees ever visited the exhibition. He had assumed Gio occasionally left the portrait to ease his loneliness. He admitted it had only been a guess. Gio explained that he actually preferred places without people. Living there suited him perfectly. Yonggun then wondered whether Gio simply disliked talking. Gio denied that completely. Instead, he explained that he had already spent far too much of his life speaking. He had always dreamed of a future where he no longer had to talk endlessly. He wanted a life where he didn't have to speak so much, carry countless burdens, or constantly worry about everything. To him, living inside the portrait perfectly matched that dream. Yonggun then asked whether Gio had once been human. Gio immediately corrected him, insisting that he was still human. Trying to phrase the question more carefully, Yonggun asked whether Gio had once lived as an ordinary human before becoming trapped inside a painting. Gio confirmed that he had. That answer made Yonggun think even more deeply. Humanoid monsters generally fell into two categories. Some were born as monsters before gradually evolving into human forms. Others started as humans but eventually became part of the root and transformed into monsters. He wondered whether Gio belonged to the second category. Perhaps that was why he kept insisting he was a person. If that were true, however, the situation became even stranger. Monsters that retained memories of their human lives were usually consumed by overwhelming negative emotions. Yet Gio felt unbelievably calm. It was not the peaceful serenity of someone living happily. Instead, it resembled the quiet stillness of someone standing at a funeral, silently mourning a death. Yonggun then asked whether Gio ever grew bored. Gio casually replied that he simply ate. The answer completely shocked Yonggun. He could hardly believe that a painting could eat. Looking at Gio's expressionless face, he found it impossible to imagine him enjoying food. His appearance suggested someone who would never be emotionally moved by anything. For a brief moment, Yonggun even feared that the ingredients might somehow involve humans. Wanting to be certain, he asked what Gio actually ate. Gio explained that he simply cooked the food he liked, prepared everything himself, and then enjoyed eating it because he was an ordinary human. Privately, Gio found the question rather strange. Meanwhile, Yonggun felt that the explanation only made Gio seem even less human. Gio soon realized what Yonggun was truly curious about. He understood that Yonggun wanted to learn the rules governing the portrait and discover what was possible inside it. Interestingly, Gio admitted that he had been wondering the exact same thing. He had also been trying to uncover the portrait's limits and capabilities. With that in mind, Gio decided to ask Yonggun to help him test something he had been curious about. Gio explained that there were certain pleasures he could only experience because he lived inside the portrait. Curious, Yonggun asked how that worked. Gio replied that it required a little help and that Yonggun himself could bring him joy. Wanting to know what he meant, Yonggun asked what kind of joy Gio was talking about. Gio made an unexpectedly simple request. He asked Yonggun to draw an apple on the portrait. Although drawing on such a valuable artwork felt deeply uncomfortable, Yonggun took out his drawing supplies and prepared to do it. Gio noticed the materials and wondered whether Yonggun always carried art supplies with him. Yonggun explained that he tried to carry a wide variety of useful items since he never knew what might happen inside the gallery. Preparing for every possible situation was the safest approach. As he spoke, he realized the current situation perfectly proved the value of that habit. Without his drawing tools, he would never have been able to fulfill Gio's request. Yonggun carefully painted an apple onto the portrait. To his complete astonishment, Gio immediately began eating the drawn apple right before his eyes. Yonggun was left speechless after watching Gio eat the apple that had just been painted. The illustrated apple even had a real scent and taste. Gio calmly explained that he was an ordinary human living inside a painting. He believed that, by the same logic, living inside the painting should allow him to do many extraordinary things. Whenever he did not feel like cooking, He simply drew a finished meal and ate it. Yongun immediately realized that no ordinary human could ever do something like that. Gio accepted that Yongun found it strange. Wanting to repay Yongun's kindness for drawing the apple, Gio decided to give him something in return. Yongun wondered what Gio was about to do this time. Gio felt grateful because Yongun had kindly drawn an apple, even after a portrait hanging on the wall had suddenly asked for one. He then began drawing something colorful. Gio recalled that after opening his eyes inside the portrait, he had experimented with many different things. Among those experiments, he had also tried painting gems. He turned those gems into paint and used them to create his artwork. The paint and the finished paintings felt as though they were alive. Inside the portrait, where he could even create warm corpses, almost nothing seemed impossible. Because of that, he became curious about what would happen if his creations connected to the reality outside the frame. He then drew a colorful gemstone. As expected, he discovered that his abilities were not completely without limits. Even so, he considered it a fitting token of gratitude. Gio handed the gemstone to Yongun as a gift to thank him. Yongun was amazed that the gem had been created simply by drawing it. He examined it closely. Gio admitted that he did not know what kind of gemstone it was. He believed it had originally formed deep underground, where the heat was intense enough to melt anything. It came from a place close enough to the planet's core that it had inherited warmth from his friend. At that moment, Yongun became certain that the portrait was not a monster. Thus, day 3 of Gio's portrait investigation came to an end. Afterward, Yongun handed the gemstone to Sabal and reported everything he had observed so far. He explained that the root was a transcendent existence that maintained the balance of every universe and dimension while creating the laws that govern them. It functioned like a system and stood as the god above all gods. The dungeons that swallowed Earth 30 years earlier were stories of new dimensions born from the veins of the root. Monsters had emerged from those dungeons in the same way. That was the knowledge possessed by the gardeners. Monsters were born from dungeons, while the root's children were born directly from the root. Although their origins and natures were completely different, Gio resembled neither of them. Even more astonishingly, Gio had also created living beings other than himself. As time passed, Gio's portrait investigation reached day 6. When Yongun visited again, he found the portrait filled with countless animals. Gio considered them his new family. The creatures flew freely throughout the painting. Yongun realized that Gio had personally created every one of them. There were around 100 in total. Gio described them as chatterboxes. He imagined they would be unbearably noisy if they actually had vocal cords. The birds gathered together to form a pond. They also enjoyed placing different objects inside their bodies to decorate themselves. Each bird had its own unique preferences, making them fascinating to watch. Yongun wondered whether the birds possessed souls. He realized this was something even monsters could not accomplish. Gio admitted that he did not know the answer. Yongun reflected that the root's children possessed no ego and could not even hold conversations. He also sensed no divinity from Gio, making it unlikely that Gio was a god. Instead, Yongun concluded that Gio was certainly a painting while also remaining human. He recognized Gio as a being capable of influencing reality itself. Through his drawings, Gio could create fate, history, and memories. Even so, whether he could create actual human beings remained unknown. Gio believed it might be possible, but it also might not. However, he had no desire to try such a thing. Creating humans felt deeply unsettling to him. He believed humanity was far too precious. He insisted that he himself was not held through anything special. He asked Yongun to be careful not to think of him as someone extraordinary. Later, Yongun returned to Sabal and discussed his findings. He admitted that all he truly understood so far was the story surrounding the portrait. He still had no answers about its abilities, the true rank of its soul, or the role Gio held within the root. Since Gio was an existence whose influence on humanity remained unknown, Yongun believed there was no better place than the Hunter Association to analyze Gio's portrait. He considered that the best choice for humanity. Sabal only smiled. He had no interest in turning the portrait into a weapon. What he wanted was a work of art. That was the very reason he had founded both his guild and his company. He admitted that he still carried pride as an artist. As a hunter, however, he possessed no pride at all. He explained that no collector expected an artisan's masterpiece to ward off evil spirits or grant pleasant dreams. He simply wanted to understand the story hidden within the painting. More than anything, Sabal wanted to preserve that story with his own hands. In the end, he accepted that no one could stop what was already unfolding. After assessing the threat, Sabol compared Geo to a natural disaster whose existence relied on impossibly rare luck. The rare gems and magical materials Geo created proved he held no hostility, leading the guild to classify the encounter as nothing short of a miracle. Sabol believed destroying such a miracle would be a terrible mistake. He explained that he had rushed to purchase the painting at auction to prevent it from falling into the wrong hands and bringing about a catastrophe. After relaxing, Sabol revealed that his unique perception allowed him to see far beyond outward appearances. He concluded that the best way to approach Geo was to treat him like an ordinary person, because that was exactly how Geo wanted to live. Meanwhile, Geo quietly continued his peaceful daily routine, preparing meals so extraordinary that glowing golden birds seemed to spring to life from his cooking. Sabol explained that Geo was an ascended being with no hostility, praising his kindness, patience, good manners, and unwillingness to harm anyone, despite possessing overwhelming power. Although others struggled to accept that conclusion, Sabol insisted a single glance had told him everything and claimed that such insight was essential for leading the guild. As the meeting ended, Sabol gave Yongun one assignment: become Geo's companion without digging too deeply into his true nature. He even instructed Yongun to occasionally take the painting outside for walks. Though surprised by the order, Yongun accepted the mission and trusted Sabol's judgment. After Yongun left, Sabol reflected alone, revealing his mysterious eyes that could see far beyond normal limits. His ultimate goal was simply to give Geo the best treatment possible. Walking through the city that night, Yongun felt relieved that Geo had not fallen into the Hunter Association's hands. Knowing that captured entities were subjected to cruel experiments, memories returned of the Sacred Gardens, where chosen gardeners partnered with origin entities to reduce dungeon threats. Those experiences had formed deep emotional bonds with the magical gardens. While passing a street food stall, Yongun remembered Geo's love of food and bought some traditional snacks. Deciding to treat Geo like an ordinary person, he returned to the gallery with the sweets. Back in the underground gallery, Yongun casually asked Geo's age. Geo revealed that he was 29, surprising Yongun, who was 33. Yongun admitted that he had expected someone in Geo's position to be much older, then quickly apologized after realizing how awkward the comment sounded. Geo seemed slightly offended at being mistaken for someone older, but the conversation quickly returned to normal. Geo then asked Yongun's age and complimented his youthful appearance. Their conversation became increasingly natural as Yongun offered him the snacks. Since Geo was younger, he suggested they stop using formal speech, and Yongun happily agreed, making their friendship feel much more comfortable. By the 17th day of the investigation, Yongun had learned that the sacred gardens were essential to maintaining the world's balance. Geo praised the gardeners for their difficult work and sympathized with the heavy burden they carried. Yongun explained that those chosen for the role had no choice but to accept it. Before ending their conversation, he handed Geo a pouch of rare seeds. Even after spending many days together, seeing Geo's hand extend from the painting still startled him. Noticing his reaction, Geo gently asked if Yongun was all right. Yongun reassured him that he was fine and had mostly grown used to the strange sight. Yongun then spoke fondly about the beauty of the vast magical gardens. Geo quietly listened and understood the weight of his responsibilities. Yongun felt that Geo truly understood his struggles. Elsewhere, Sabol hinted that his plans extended far beyond what anyone realized. Back in the gallery, Yongun politely invited Geo to leave the painting for a short sightseeing trip. Geo was surprised by the unexpected invitation but calmly confirmed that it was simply a casual outing. Sabol explained that bringing an origin-linked entity into reality was extremely dangerous because no one knew the true limits of the mysterious artist's powers. Since eliminating him was impossible, they decided it would be better to observe him sooner rather than later. Back in their conversation, Yongun offered to personally guide Geo through modern society, believing it was finally time for him to step back into the real world. Geo accepted, and the two began planning the best time to meet. Inside the painting, Geo placed the jewel beside his magical bird while admitting that he was mentally exhausted. Remembering how everyone outside froze in fear just by looking at him, he realized that his overwhelming power distorted reality itself. People couldn't even properly perceive him because of the enormous gap between his existence and that of ordinary humans. Although their frightened reactions surprised him, he refused to let them bother him. While watering his crops, Geo decided to solve this perception problem before meeting the investigator. After finishing his work, he proudly admired his beautiful garden, satisfied that all his effort had paid off. Cleaning himself up, he playfully praised his golden bird for being so adorable. Unlike the ordinary birds, this one clearly understood him, so he decided it deserved a proper name. His first idea, Golden Boy, immediately made both him and the bird cringe. Embarrassed, he laughed at himself before settling on the name Hi instead. The happy bird rubbed against his face, making Gio smile as he thanked it for accepting such a simple name. Returning to the cabin, Gio finished his final painting before finally getting some well-deserved rest. As he painted a violent ocean, the system suddenly activated and began searching for a matching dimension. Strange visions of ruined worlds, shadowy figures, and a terrifying demon flashed before his eyes. Moments later, the system successfully linked the painting to its correct dimension. Completely exhausted, Gio collapsed onto his bed and fell asleep. The next morning, Gio woke up refreshed, only to find a giant notification window waiting for him. Curious, he checked the system and discovered that his ocean painting had officially been named Breathing Sea. The system had also automatically named all of his other completed artworks. As he continued reading, Gio learned that every painting could connect to another dimension through a compatible player. Unsure whether it was actually safe, he hesitated while Hai quietly landed on his shoulder, helping him calm down. Soon, his curiosity gets the better of him, and he begins exploring the feature. The help menu explains that a compatible player acts as a guide through unexplored dimensions. The system automatically selects someone whose core traits perfectly match Gio's, allowing him to temporarily inhabit that person's body with their permission. Looking through the suggested candidates, Giovanni and Argo, Gio first jokes that the system simply matched similar names, before realizing it had probably performed a much deeper compatibility search. Excited by the endless possibilities, he feels he will never be bored again. His attention then shifts to the dark city painting he created. To his surprise, the system warns that the world doesn't actually exist, meaning Gio accidentally created an entirely new dimension from scratch. Accepting the challenge, Gio jokes that his peaceful life keeps turning into chaos. Just then, another notification appears, reminding him to fix his perception problem. Smiling confidently, he decides this is the perfect chance to test everything. Gio selects Giovanni as his compatible player and begins the dimensional transfer, telling Hai to trust him. During the journey, he complains about the rough teleportation before noticing that his bird has disappeared. After arriving, Gio finds himself inside a silent white world that resembles an abandoned hospital. Suddenly, a handsome, long-haired blonde man approaches with an elegant and noble presence. Gio is left speechless when he realizes the stranger looks exactly like him. Smiling warmly, the mysterious man introduces himself as Giovanni of the prestigious Batland clan. Gio politely introduces himself and realizes he has finally met his compatible player. Seeing how similar they look, he jokes that they could almost be the same person. Giovanni smiles, believing their connection goes far beyond appearances. Gio admits that he has never been good at smiling, and his serious expression has always caused people to misunderstand him. Giovanni finds that relatable, and believes Gio will eventually learn to smile naturally. Curious about the synchronization, Gio asks whether the process is truly safe. Giovanni explains that there is nothing to lose because he has already passed away. His homeland was swallowed by the ocean, leaving nothing behind except its memories. Although saddened by the tragic story, Gio continues listening. Giovanni reveals that only the mermaids survived, while their world became an isolated realm, governed by strict rules. Gio connects this to the mysterious dimensions Jong-un once described. Giovanni explains that although they come from different worlds, their souls share extraordinary compatibility. Through synchronization, they will continue creating memories together, allowing his existence to live on through the origin. Since nobody truly understands the origin, Giovanni simply accepts it as fate. Before parting, he entrusts Gio with protecting the forgotten sun god of his ruined world. At first, Gio doubts that he can handle such a responsibility. However, after learning that forgotten gods eventually disappear, he agrees to occasionally keep the lonely deity company. In return, he will gain access to the god's divine power. Giovanni then reveals one final wish involving his beloved student, asking Gio to grant the child a peaceful end after the fall of their underwater kingdom. Back in the sanctuary, Hai quietly waits beside the glowing jewel while Gio's real body remains motionless inside the gallery. The system records Giovanni's final requests as the room suddenly turns freezing cold and the synchronization begins. Unbearable pain overwhelms Gio. Foreign memories flood into his mind. His black hair slowly turns blonde, and Giovanni's tragic final moments become his own. Unable to resist the emotional torrent, Gio quietly accepts everything. Once the synchronization is complete, he loses consciousness without a single regret. The story then shifts to a modern city where the wealthy collector Sabol confidently prepares new security measures for dealing with the mysterious newcomer, Geo. The following morning, the organization's headquarters erupts with rumors after strict rules regarding Geo are officially announced. As everyone reads through the unusual regulations, they begin wondering whether the mysterious hooded employee is truly human or something far more terrifying. The company's bizarre new policies leave every employee confused. Since their eccentric boss never jokes during official announcements, everyone assumes the situation is completely serious. Before long, the staff reaches the same conclusion. The mysterious hooded man is no ordinary human, so treating him with absolute respect is the only safe option. Although many employees complain about the absurd rules, none of them dares to question them. The security team eventually realizes that the new employee is the same terrifying being connected to the painting sealed in the 5th basement. Meanwhile, Yonggun praises his team for preventing any problems so far. He believes that strict etiquette will keep everyone safe and prevent unnecessary incidents throughout the headquarters. Sabol agrees, but warns that revealing Geo's true identity could trigger nationwide panic. To avoid that, they decide to introduce him to the public as an S-class hunter, believing that concealing his true nature will greatly reduce the overall risk. Satisfied with the plan, Sabol arranges a luxury hotel for Geo and assigns Yonggun to personally escort him. Although the responsibility makes him nervous, Yonggun accepts the task. When he arrives at the 5th basement, he is shocked to find Geo already standing outside the painting. Even more surprising, Geo's overwhelming aura and emotionless presence have completely disappeared. Geo explains that he intentionally suppressed his powers so ordinary people would no longer fear him. The dramatic change leaves Yonggun completely astonished. Over the past 2 days, Geo had remained inside the painting while slowly adapting to Giovanni's powers. As the synchronization reaches 4%, Giovanni's memories, emotions, and gentle personality gradually become part of Geo. At the same time, Geo regains many ordinary human traits. Hunger, sleep, and the ability to enjoy food all return, while his terrifying aura becomes calm enough for normal people to approach without fear. Back in the gallery, Geo casually mentions that he is hungry, prompting Yonggun to begin their long-awaited tour. Although still cautious, Yonggun is amazed by how naturally human Geo now behaves. While walking through the building, Yonggun realizes that Geo is constantly suppressing his own power, despite the pain it causes, simply to protect everyone around him. Witnessing such kindness only deepens his concern that others might one day take advantage of Geo's gentle nature. Their tour eventually reaches the outside world, where Geo steps into the modern city for the first time in years. He quietly admires the bustling streets, towering skyscrapers, and thriving civilization that had emerged after the Great Cataclysm. Watching Geo's excitement, Yonggun smiles, amused as people casually carry giant weapons through the streets. Hunters with wings, heavy armor, and intimidating appearances reflect how humanity has adapted since the Cataclysm. Noticing the curious stares, Yonggun realizes Geo still radiates the presence of a high-class monster, even while suppressing his power. He advises Geo to keep his hood up to avoid drawing attention from rival guilds. Geo agrees and points toward the elevated railway. Yonggun explains that they will take the modern train to a famous restaurant. Geo is amazed that civilization has advanced so much in only 31 years. At the crowded station, Yonggun uses a corporate pass to gain VIP access and hands Geo an unlimited company card, telling him to buy anything he wants. Geo carefully accepts it, surprised by the trust. While riding a glass elevator overlooking the city, Geo notices how empty the public transportation is. Yonggun explains that tickets are simply too expensive. On the train, Geo observes that capitalism survived the apocalypse, while Yonggun remarks that the gap between the rich and the poor has only grown wider. Checking the time, Yonggun points out that the train should have been packed during the morning rush hour. Shocked by the nearly empty carriage, Geo learns that most hunters start work around 7 every morning, leading him to conclude that human rights have practically disappeared, and that becoming a painting may have been an unexpected blessing. As snow begins to fall, Geo remembers the sweets Yonggun had given him and promises to repay the kindness. Yonggun refuses, instead mentioning some delicious street food before realizing Geo has probably never tried it. Geo quietly appreciates being treated like an ordinary person. Yonggun promises to find a food stall, but explains that strict regulations have forced many vendors out of business. Their conversation shifts to society's class system. Showing his official ID, Yonggun explains the government's 5-tier ranking system. The highest class enjoys the greatest privileges. Lower-ranked city residents lose status because of poor income or unstable jobs. Rural citizens belong to the 3rd class. unregistered border residents to the fourth, and criminals fall into the fifth after losing nearly all legal protection. When Geo asks why, Yongun explains that the constant threat of dungeons has forced society to value security over equality. As they walk through a beautiful district, Yongun explains how powerful monsters reshape the world. Massive defensive walls now protect cities, while monster materials have fueled remarkable technological advancements, demonstrating magic. He describes how elite hunters defend the cities while abandoned provinces continue struggling with danger and shortages. Eventually, they arrive at an elegant restaurant that Yongun proudly chose because none of its dishes contain monster ingredients. Over lunch, he reflects on how ordinary life has changed since the Great Cataclysm. Geo was amazed that the world had changed so completely in only 31 years, though the wonderful meal reminded him that life's simple joys still remained. Afterward, they strolled beside a warm artificial canal. Despite the winter weather, Yongun explained that terraforming magic had transformed the district into a massive greenhouse. Geo admired an unfamiliar bird and fed it some seeds. Yongun revealed that it was a utility monster raised for its valuable crafting materials. As more birds gathered around, Geo was delighted to see humans and monsters peacefully coexisting. Yongun suggested they relax by dipping their feet into the warm canal, sitting beside the crystal clear water. Geo noticed that it smelled like the ocean despite being in the middle of the city. The moment he realized it, an overwhelming surge of magical energy erupted from his body. The canal exploded into violent waves as mana fluctuated wildly. Geo's hood slipped off, revealing his long, glowing blonde hair. Horrified, Yongun called out in panic, struggling to understand the terrifying transformation before him. Geo stood there with an unshakable, godlike aura, despite his calm and welcoming appearance. When Yongun questioned him, Geo quietly nodded. Introducing himself once again, he insisted that his name had never changed. Yet beneath his composed expression, he struggled to hide his own fear. Later, at a 5-star hotel, Yongun handed Geo the key to a luxury suite, confirmed their dinner plans, and wished him a good rest. The moment he returned to his own room, he collapsed onto the floor, drenched in cold sweat. The terrifying sight at the canal had convinced Yongun that Geo was not truly human. He realized that the being had introduced itself differently. Geo normally stated his full name, but after the surge of power, he responded with only the first part when asked for his original name, revealing an identity centered around his godlike existence. Yongun blamed himself for letting his guard down. He concluded that he was now sharing a hotel with an unstoppable being that was merely pretending to be human. Meanwhile, Geo relaxed on the soft bed, admitting that modern society felt intimidating. After resting, he admired the view from the 45th floor until hunger struck, revealing the tiny bird hidden beneath his cape. He regretted that he couldn't feed it inside the hotel. The little bird affectionately rubbed against him as Geo cheerfully promised to make it something sweet once they returned home, completely unaware of the fear he had caused. Elsewhere, Yongun reviewed the day's events. Relieved that nothing disastrous had happened, he prayed that the mysterious being was only trying to live like a human. Even so, the canal incident continued haunting him. He then recalled their earlier speedboat ride. The moment Geo's presence disturbed the water and he suddenly stood up, the boat began rocking violently. Yongun warned that he was scaring the driver, but Geo explained that he had simply been fascinated by the canal. Although Yongun accepted the apology, he pointed out that the canal smelled like the ocean and that Geo had looked ready to jump in. Geo replied that he had only stood because he was worried Yongun might fall. Choosing not to argue, Yongun instead asked whether Geo liked the sea. Looking at the towering canal walls, Geo hesitated as the lingering emotions of the priest Giovanni, who had deeply loved the ocean, slowly blended with his own. After thinking for a moment, Geo admitted that he did like the sea, leaving Yongun confused by the seemingly contradictory answer. Changing the subject, Geo asked about mermaids. Alarmed, Yongun explained that aquatic creatures had appeared in flooded regions and often resembled mythical beings. After the Great Cataclysm, humanity's beliefs had turned ancient myths, legends, and urban stories into real monsters, transforming Earth into a giant dungeon governed by game-like rules. At that moment, Geo's system displayed 2 new quests: speak with the sun god and eliminate the Little Mermaid. Before discussing them any further, They arrived at an elegant restaurant built inside the shell of a giant sea monster. During lunch, Yongun explained that the restaurant itself was a static dungeon. Since Gio knew nothing about modern dungeons, he described the different types. Static dungeons remained fixed in one location, while roaming dungeons moved unpredictably and trapped people under bizarre conditions, such as a man in his 30s entering a convenience store at night. Gio found the idea absurd, realizing that people could die simply for buying snacks. Yongun admitted that such dungeons spread constant fear, despite being extremely rare. He added that static dungeons permanently replaced parts of Earth with foreign landscapes. This marine-themed dungeon had been cleared not through combat, but because an ordinary chef had awakened special abilities and impressed the dungeon master with exceptional cooking, proving that strength was not always the answer. Gio smiled at the story until Yongun revealed that the chef was now 92 years old and still working because awakened hunters aged far more slowly. The thought of still working in his 90s genuinely horrified Gio. Yongun continued by explaining village-type dungeons, which permanently transformed entire regions, and gateway dungeons, which randomly connected Earth to other dimensions like a game's level selection screen. Satisfied, Gio said he understood everything. When Yongun asked what he thought of the meal, Gio warmly praised it for reminding him of the happy dinners he had once shared with his beloved companions. His radiant smile briefly left Yongun speechless, and despite knowing the truth, he felt genuinely happy seeing Gio enjoy himself. Soon, nearby diners began whispering while staring at them. And that's where we'll end today's chapter. If you enjoyed the recap, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment part 2 if you want the next chapter as soon as possible. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.